Smith's theory of the division of labor, which leads to greater productivity, greater wealth, opulence that diffuses itself through society, offers a real insight into the transformations of the Industrial Revolution and will raise profound questions for the problem of distributive justice. If there's a changing size in the pie, how does it affect the question of how we distribute property, which is still a finite good? But the Industrial Revolution would also cause new questions about the nature of transactional justice, the justice of exchanges. Remember that Aristotle says that for a transaction, an exchange to be just, the value of what's exchanged must be equal. And he has a very valuable and extensive discussion of this in Nicomachean Ethics, Book 5, where he talks about money and prices and values, because he recognizes that money is a convention that has been created to allow people to exchange things of equal value. And so money is a medium of exchange. It's a way that people can trade things of equal value without having to trade their bread for a house or a shoe for some other good that someone makes. So Aristotle already realizes that money is a medium of exchange. And he talks about money and prices and values, and his theory of transactional justice is grounded in the idea that the value of things that are exchanged should be equal, else it's not fair. Smith picks up on these ideas already in Book 1 of The Wealth of Nations, because he realizes that it's so important. And indeed, in the world of the Industrial Revolution, this new kind of society, exchanges will become even more important. In the world of markets, trades, exchanges, contracts are far more profoundly important, are far more fundamental than they ever had been before. And so transactional justice becomes more urgent than it ever had been before. Smith talks about this in The Wealth of Nations and offers a paradox that's evocative for the kinds of questions that are involved in the relationship between money and prices and values. The paradox of diamonds and water. He says, think about water. It's essential. It is extremely useful. We must have water. We need water. It's the most useful thing there is. You die without it. And yet, it's extremely cheap. Think about a diamond. It's useless. It's mere ornament. It serves no function. And yet, it is dear. It's extremely expensive. That's a paradox, Smith says, because the exchange value, the price of these commodities, has no relationship to their use value. Now, Smith is already trying to play around with scarcity. He realizes that diamonds are more scarce than water, and usefulness. But he never will resolve this paradox in a satisfactory way. He then goes on to talk about prices and values. And it's important to pay attention to Smith's discussion in these passages, and it's important to realize that Smith makes a huge mess. And this historically is important. Smith does not understand prices. One of the greatest economists of all time, the founding figure of classical economics, can never satisfactorily ground a theory of prices and values. And this will be one of the problems that looms over classical economics. And so we need to examine clearly what Smith thinks the problem is. Smith says that the first price is labor. He says, imagine a simple society, a hunter-gatherer society. If it takes 2 hours to kill a beaver and 1 hour to kill a deer, then what is the relationship? What is the exchange rate between beavers and deer? Well, it's 2 to 1. You should trade 2 deer for every beaver, because it takes 2 hours to kill 2 deers, and it takes 2 hours to kill 1 beaver. And so that would be a just exchange. And people would exchange at the rate of the labor that goes into it. Now, Smith comes to argue, wrongly, that this is the basis of value. And in fact, it's distinctive of many of the classical economists that they move away from usefulness as the source of value and towards labor as the source of value and the source of a price. Smith argues that profits and rents also figure into a price, but for Smith, the cost of production, labor itself, is fundamental to the price of a good in a market. And so Smith says that really it is labor that is the source of values. That it is the amount of labor that goes into something that will cause it to have the price that it has. And he says, we have to recognize that there's differences in intensity and ingenuity. He realizes that some kinds of labor are more skilled, they require kinds of preparation. And he thinks that somehow you could account for that, but that what really matters is the quantity of labor that goes into a thing. And Smith, the greatest of the classical economists, builds his entire system of prices and values on this argument that the value of something is really grounded not just in its usefulness, not just in its scarcity, but in the amount of work that it takes to produce it.